Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Miss Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is a former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and a life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're tackling people pleasing and how lawyers can set boundaries without guilt. This is People Pleasing, setting boundaries without guilt with Miss Olivia. How are you doing, my dear?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm well. Miss Olivia, a lot of lawyers pride themselves on being helpful and responsive. Where's the line between being reliable and falling into that people-pleasing territory?
So there's two things people really need to look at here. The first thing that I teach my clients is I actually want you to define what being responsive means to you. And I want you to define it in a way that's measurable and objective. When most people fail to do this, they end up defaulting to responding as soon as possible. And that leads them to drop whatever they're in the middle of. It really decreases their productivity and efficiency, and they're always just putting out fires and triaging things. So define what responsive enough means to you, and then you can start to figure out the boundaries that fall in line with that. If you want to respond same day, that means you don't need to be in your inbox all day long. If it means 4 hours to you, then you can work on something in a deep focused work setting and then switch back to your inbox. So just figuring out whatever your standard is. If 4 hours seems crazy and you want to check your email once an hour, you can set up a 15-minute time block at the top of every hour or at the end of every hour where you're checking in, but you're not constantly interrupting yourself. So just figure out what standard you're trying to hold yourself to. That's the first thing you want to do. The second thing that I watch people struggle with is they're torn between wanting to be reliable and actually being reliable.
Right.
So my people pleasers, they have such a strong desire that they want to be reliable. So when a request comes in, they either drop what they're doing or they say yes to it. They don't think about whether they can actually make time for it and get it done within the time that they're promising to do it. And this really leads them to overpromise and underdeliver because they're desiring to be reliable instead of really prioritizing actually being reliable. When people focus on the latter, they figure out how long a task will take, they check their availability, they get really clear on whether or not they can actually deliver in the time that they're promising to versus just doing the easy thing in the moment, which is saying yes and not doing the math or figuring out what they have capacity for.
What are some signs that an attorney is people-pleasing instead of setting real boundaries for themselves?
So the first thing that people need to do is just get clear on what it means to actually set a boundary. That's how you're going to be able to figure out whether you're setting a boundary or whether you're not. And the biggest misconception that I see when it comes to boundary setting is that people mistakenly believe it's about controlling the other person.
Right.
So they'll make requests or tell people, you can't call me after 6 p.m. And the problem with that is that people have free will. So they quite literally get to do whatever it is that they want. We can't control other people. So proper boundary setting is all about controlling yourself. I like to think of it as like an if-then statement. If someone does this, then I will do this thing. So if someone calls you after 6 and your boundary is not to answer calls after 6 p.m., they can call you. There's nothing wrong with that. And you simply don't answer. So being very clear about what is and isn't a boundary. If you're trying to control the other person, you're already going off the rails. But from there, the standard that I use is if you're making a decision because we like to be helpful, we like to be generous, we like to be in service to our clients, our colleagues, you just want to check in, whatever decision you're making, would you make a different decision if no one else had an opinion about it? And if the answer is yes, I would totally choose to do something different if my boss didn't have an opinion about this, or the client didn't have an opinion about this, or whoever. Maybe it's someone in your personal life. If my mom didn't have an opinion about this, if you would do something differently, then you're people pleasing. If you wouldn't, if you'd still choose to do the exact same thing, then you're making a decision from internal desire, not external pressure, and you're operating from what I like to call clean space.
So why do so many attorneys feel guilty when they try to set those limits on their time and their energy and what they do?
Yeah, it's all about their mindset. So guilt comes from should thinking that you should be doing something differently than you're about to do. So I think in the legal industry specifically, so many people have either been taught from mentors or just have beliefs about what it means to be a good lawyer. I should answer when a client calls. I should be a certain level of responsive. I
Hmm.
should say yes if someone asks me for help. I shouldn't turn down a case if someone refers it to me. And whenever you're thinking those should or shouldn't thoughts, it triggers guilt. And then most people don't like to feel guilty. It makes them feel uncomfortable. So they avoid the guilt by people pleasing. So I really want to challenge people to think about, what beliefs do you have about what's required to practice law? I used to work at a law firm, and our standard of operating was you worked weekends. Attorneys should work weekends. If you're not working weekends, you're kind of lazy or not driven enough. And you could just get to challenge those preconceived notions. Who taught that to me? Do I like the way that they're living their life or practicing
Hmm.
law? Do I want the same result that they have? Might I be able to challenge that should and operate under a different belief system and still have the same level of success? I know my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned a business for over 40 years. And he used to have the belief that you couldn't take a vacation if you wanted to be a
Hmm.
successful business owner. And that was a thought that I started thinking early on in my business. And then I decided, you know what? That's not true. That's just an opinion. And I get to challenge that if I want. And now I take lots of vacations and still have a successful business. So there are things we learn along the way. And we just want to challenge those and decide if we really want to keep holding on to them or if we want to let them go.
Awesome. What are some of the real costs of people pleasing professionally, financially, or even personally, that can affect them and hurt them?
Totally. The biggest one I see with people pleasing is resentment.
Mm.
We make a decision because we're taking care of the other person's emotional experience instead of our own. And then because we spend our time doing things we would prefer not to be doing, we end up feeling resentful. And then think about how you show up in your professional relationships, your personal relationships when you're filled with resentment. It's not good. So it leads to way more conflict with people, arguing, maybe being passive aggressive. I see that a ton. We'll also expect other people to people please us if we're people pleasing them. So that's a catch 22 there. If you're expecting that the solution isn't to have people please you, but instead for you to monitor your own people pleasing and dial it down by setting those boundaries.
Mm.
Financially, this leads to a lot of overspending. We definitely see this during the holiday season. We'll spend money on people because we're worried about hurting their feelings or we want them to have a certain opinion of us and it doesn't align with our long-term financial goals. And then as far as work goes, I also see people again overpromise and underdeliver, which leads to a diminished professional reputation over
Mm.
time. You end up being unreliable instead of what you're hoping to be, which is reliable. And then also just overworking and burnout. So you really burn the candle at both ends, overcommit yourself, and that leads to doing diminished work and being exhausted and really losing a passion for the work that you're doing because you're just constantly abandoning yourself a little bit more day after day.
Wow. So, Miss Olivia, for lawyers who want to start saying no more often, what's the first step that you recommend them to do?
The first step is simply recognizing that you have a choice. So much people pleasing comes as the result of thinking, I have to do this, I must do this, I need to do this, I don't have a choice, I can't say no. All
Mhm.
those thought errors, and they're simply not true. I tell my clients all the time, you always have a choice.
All
You
right.
can say yes, you can say no. You might not like the choices you have. A lot of people prefer what I call a false third option. So they'll want to say no, but they'll also want a person to not have a negative opinion of them as they say no. And you can say no and take whatever judgment or consequence comes, or you can people please and say yes. And then
Mhm.
they'll probably think of you favorably because you're doing what they want you to do.
Mhm.
But you don't get to combine controlling their emotional reaction and saying no. So you just have to identify, what choices do I have? And then from there, identify your reasons. What would drive you to pick option number one? What would drive you to pick option number two? And ask yourself which reasons you like more. And I tell people, pick the path that aligns with the reasons that you like more and creates the life that you want to live.
Boundaries can feel awkward at first, I think. So how do you coach clients to handle this discomfort, that anxiety that comes with enforcing these boundaries?
1000%. It's super uncomfortable, especially a lot of people hope to only have to enforce a boundary one time. And that is very rarely the case, especially in work settings. You might have to continuously assert a boundary and honor that boundary that you've set. And that can be super uncomfortable. So the first step is just to get really clear on what discomfort is coming up for you. Is
Hmm.
it guilt? Is it worry? Is it fear? I like to think of anxiety as fear of feeling another emotion.
Hmm.
So, what do you anticipate might be on the horizon? Are you afraid to feel judged? Are you afraid to feel misunderstood? Finding that negative emotion and then really recognizing it can't hurt you. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Like you're going to feel it in that pit of your stomach there. But other than that, nothing really happens. Emotions are just vibrations that we feel in our body. And when we're not thinking of them like that, we work so hard to basically twist ourselves into a pretzel to avoid them. But if you recognize they don't have that much power other than they just feel a little uncomfortable physically in our body, then you can work on doing what I call gagging and going through the negative emotion. And you
Right.
just decide what that intentional action is that you need to take. And then you feel your way through it.
Can you share an example of a time a client set a strong boundary and what changed for them afterwards?
Totally. So, one is one that I mentioned earlier. I had a client who had young kids, and it was really important to her to be present at home with her family during dinner time. And she worked in big loss. So there were certain demands on her time, and she would typically log back into work afterwards,
Mm,
after dinner. But she made a rule that she would not answer phone calls between 6 and 8. So she had that time to be present with her family.
absolutely.
Another big boundary that I have people set, this is a rule I use in my own business: no unscheduled calls. So if someone calls you and your phone rings and it wasn't on your calendar, you don't answer, you let it go to voicemail. You can text or email them and say, "Hey, I saw you called. Give me some context for what this is about." And I'll give you a couple times that work for me. And you can have your assistant do that if you don't want to do that. Totally up to you. But that really allows people to control their calendar, which is the first step to really managing your time effectively. And it
Mm.
allows them to stop allowing interruptions and reshuffling their schedule so they can get their most important work done. And then another boundary that one of my clients is working on right now, which has been so fun to watch her put this into practice. She really needs some time throughout her year to do deep, focused work. So she's implemented a policy where 1 week per quarter, she doesn't do any calls or meetings with clients.
Awesome.
And she sets that up ahead of time. And even if they reach out or call her, everything gets pushed to the following week. She really gives herself that space, and it's allowed her to get so much more done, both in her practice and also in her personal life, like taking care of those small everyday life things like oil changes or, work on the house, having a contractor come by. And it's really given her some space to breathe.
Awesome. And keeping with the theme of boundaries, how can setting these boundaries actually improve relationships with, clients, colleagues, or even your family?
Absolutely. So, number one, less arguments because there's less resentment or frustration with other people. You
Mhm.
spend your time doing things that you want to be doing instead of doing things that you don't want to be doing. So,
Yeah.
you just enjoy everyone more. You enjoy your work more, your clients more, your family more, your friends more. Life just gets better when you stop doing stuff you don't want to do. Other than that, though, you really gain so much productivity because you're able to sit down, do what you planned to do, honor the schedule that you made for the day, and get through it. So you get to the end of your day feeling really productive and accomplished and proud. And that makes you more reliable. You'll also do better work overall because you're not overextending yourself. So the work product gets better. You tend to get better client results. You're not rushing and making, careless mistakes. So you really improve your performance overall, which I think people think is counterintuitive. If I just work harder, I'll do better, but that's not actually the case.
And for someone listening who knows they are a people pleaser, or maybe they just found out they're a people pleaser by listening to this, what's one boundary they could set today to start taking back some control?
Yeah, I totally relate to that too. When I was practicing law in the early days, I didn't know I was a people pleaser. I just thought I was someone who went above and beyond and
Right.
was really helpful and a dedicated team member. And then when I started to learn more about well, would you make a different decision if no one else had an opinion about it? I was like, ooh, I am people pleasing a lot more than I thought. And I don't think that there's a bright line standard for a perfect boundary to set. I think some of the easy ones are like when you'll check email or when you will or won't take calls. Those can be some small boundaries that you can start to implement. But I think the best framework is take a look at last week and evaluate it. Where did you people please? And you don't have to solve all of the people pleasing all at once, but just pick one instance where you people pleased and get really clear. What would you do next time instead to honor yourself, to honor your preferences? What boundary would you put in place? And then when you've done that work ahead of time, the next time you find yourself in that situation, you're already going to have that playbook mapped out. So it's going to be a lot easier to resist the urge to people please. My last tip for people who really struggle with this, buy yourself some time if you need to. Right. If someone calls you and they ask you to take on a project or start working on a matter or get them something on a case that you're already working on and your natural inclination is to just say yes immediately, buy yourself some time. Ask them, hey, let me check my calendar, or I need to check with one other person, even if that's not true. Just get off the phone so you can make a decision without the pressure of the person being on the other line. Get clear on what you actually want to do, and you can call them back literally 5 minutes later, 2 minutes later. It doesn't matter, but normally it's easier to resist the urge to people please if you give yourself a little space.
Amazing. Good stuff, Miss Olivia. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Awesome. And that wraps up today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop people pleasing and start building boundaries that work for you, visit oliviavizachero.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone that might find it helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.